I've got a question here. So I'll voice over for Jack. You were saying that we are an RSL, registered social landlord, and you were speaking about becoming a charity.
They're not.
But is there not a risk involved in that? If you become a charity, then you may lose a lot of money. If you're an RSL, it means that the government recognise you and support you with funding, I think. So there's laws to do with that, but if you change over to becoming a charity, what actually happens? You know, I know that you become free, but what if we lose money? What if we then develop more problems? Can we then ask for government help, or do we lose all of that benefit?
Okay, there are two separate issues. Becoming a charity and ceasing to be a registered social landlord are two different things. You can be a charity and a registered social landlord. That's not a problem. In fact, we are one of the few housing associations that are not a registered charity. 86% of housing associations in Scotland are charities. For the most noble of motives, like Alan Carr, avoid you having to pay tax. If this year, as you saw from the accounts, we've been hit with a tax bill for £100 or £1,000, and I don't mind, and as an association, we don't mind paying tax on money we have, but because the auditors have changed, not our auditors, but the auditing profession, have changed the system of calculating their profit, which means that any money we spend, as Jerry Shepherd said, any money we spend on central heating, windows, kitchens, bathrooms, is not counted as expenditure. So if we spend £500,000 on those sort of things, at the end of the year, when they're calculating the tax, they say, well, you didn't spend it, and you're paying 26% of that money that you didn't spend as tax. So you end up paying £100,000 on money we've already spent putting in windows and kitchens. So for that reason, we're being forced to consider becoming a charity. So that secures ourselves financially in that way. Ceasing to be a registered social landlord is separate from that, and it's something that we are in the early stages of discussing with the government. The reasons, well, is there a risk? Yes, there is to some extent. You won't get money grant from the government. We have not had major grant from the government since 1995. That is 17 years ago. We do not require government funding. All our works are paid for out of the rent. So it's not really, we don't see it as a major risk. We're no longer a developing association. The other thing is that the government is virtually bankrupt. The social housing budget is now reduced to a fraction of what it was. The chances of getting money to build new social housing at rent levels that are affordable. If we built housing now for rent, a two-bedroom flat would start at £3,500 a year in rent, compared to about £2,500 that we charge. And that's by the government. That's why you have to borrow, you have to charge your rent so you can borrow enough money. When we renovated the tenements and built the new housing around here, we got between 90 and 97% government subsidy. The subsidy now is something in the region of 30 to 35%. The rest of the cost is paid for out of rents. If you build houses, you're having to charge astronomical rents. And that's another reason why we're considering ceasing to be a registered social landlord. There are other issues that go along with being a registered social landlord, primarily the bureaucracy involved in, we're treated as a public body. We're treated now as if we were council housing, which we never were. We have to go through European procurement legislation. That adds to the cost of appointing contractors. We have to advertise in the European Journal published in Brussels if we want to replace our gas servicing contractor, so that somebody in Sicily or in Munich can tender for the work if they wish to. And if they object to the shortlist we've drawn up, we can get involved in appeals process, God knows what else. It's an absolute bureaucratic nonsense. It's fine if you're GHA or the British government, but for an organisation our size, I have to do that. It's just, and you have to employ consultants to prepare all this stuff and prepare all the documentation. It costs you money to do it, and it's a complete waste of time. You also have the issue of holders' referrals, where the council effectively can nominate somebody to the housing association, and we are virtually debarred from refusing them. Now, what that means, and I'm not wanting to encourage people to do this, what that means is if your son or daughter living with you applies to us for a house, when you put in our housing list, we'll be saying, well, it'll be several years before you get an offer, but at least you know that. If they turn up at the homeless persons unit and say they're homeless, they would like to live in Reidvale Street, and the council refer them, and we have a house in Reidvale Street, they get it. Now, that is grossly unfair. It doesn't happen as much as it might, because Jim is quite good at negotiating with the council, so they don't always get all the things that they think they're going to get. The other problem that's come up now is what's called the National Construction It's the National Accommodation Strategy for Sex Offenders. The government has decided that it's better to deal with sex offenders by putting them in stable accommodation so you know where they are and the police can keep an eye on them. As part of that legislation, registered social landlords must cooperate with the local authority. Fortunately, the politicians, being the sort of incompetent people they are, they don't specify what cooperate means. And when the council turn around and say, and we produce this procedure, which would mean, for example, a member of our staff would have to be the nominated official within Reidvale who would link with the local authority over the housing of sex offenders. That person would not be permitted to tell their colleagues or myself or the committee or any resident that they were housing a sex offender in the community. And if they did tell anybody, and if the information got out, they could be prosecuted with a criminal offence. The housing officer, right? We believe that is utterly impossible, apart from the fact that we consider it inappropriate and it's not something we would do. We're under pressure to sign this protocol with the council, which we are saying we can't do, because we can't guarantee that these matters will be kept confidential. Every housing association in Glasgow is doing that, by the way, it's not just us. But and I think in this instance, the legislation is not strong enough to force us to do what they want us to do. But no doubt they will come back at some point in the future with tighter legislation. And the problem is, what used to be something that was dealt with by big bureaucracies and central government through council housing, they are now applying it to all registered social landlords. They're treating us as if we were Glasgow City Council Housing Department, and we're not. We're a much smaller community, we're a more integrated community. Everybody knows everybody else's business, and we all, it's not the sort of place that you can run and do things like that, even if we wanted to. So, I'm not saying that this is the reason that we're doing it, but it's an example of the type of thing. Increasingly, they bring in legislation which makes a lot of sense if you're talking about a big organisation like Edinburgh City Council Housing Department or GHA, but it doesn't make any sense at all if you're talking about a small housing association of under 1,000 houses. And that's why we're exploring it, Mr. Giffen. It's not something we've decided, it's not something we can decide without the tenants' support. We would have to have a ballot of all the tenants to do that, even if we were allowed to do it, because the regulator has to allow us to deregister, which we're not keen to do. The committee haven't made a decision on this either. It's merely something that we're beginning to talk about, and we are examining the implications. Some of the issues you've raised, the committee will want to be reassured of. Some of the things you raised, it may turn out that it makes it impossible for us to proceed with this, in which case we'll have to stop, just carry on as before. But I understand your concerns, but I can assure you the committee will not will not propose anything to the tenants around here or to the members of the association that they don't think is in the best interest of the association and everybody else.
Okay.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for
I'll
the
teach you to ask a question.
Is there any other questions?
Actually,
No.